Let's concentrate on macros. The question remains, can Modi's A-team deliver? We are going to ask these and other questions to Arundhati Bhattacharya, Chairman, State Bank of India, and Dr. Saumitra Chaudhuri, former member of the Planning Commission, one of our veteran economists, done so much work on input-output analysis for so many things that the government has wanted him to do. Mrs. Bhattacharya, Dr. Chaudhuri, thank you very much for joining us. Ramdev Agarwal is also joined in as our guest editor and will be asking you his set of questions. Dr. Chaudhuri, let me start with you. What is your sense? Are you getting a sense that as an economy we have troughed out and that it will only be a matter of time that we hit that 6 and 6.5% growth?
Yes, but first I did not do input-output analysis.
Okay,
that's not what is you wrong.
Okay.
But thereafter, let's say that I think the last couple of years you could say that we had actually troughed out. We are at the bottom of the heap. We weren't getting any worse, but there was no sign of improvement. In the last quarter, there has been, well, if you look at the industrial output numbers, there has been some signs of improvement. And if you look at the Q4 numbers for all companies put together, there is something encouraging about profit growth. So yes, perhaps I think we are at a turning point. We are at a revival point. I think there is also an improvement in the confidence conditions. But after 3 years of going very slow, problems tend to accumulate, and expecting that those problems will go away overnight may be unrealistic. So it is going to happen, but it'll take a little bit of time. But if you say that can we get to about 6%, maybe in a year's time, I think that's a realistic proposal. We could get it even earlier. It depends on how the government leads from the front on the areas of infrastructure investment in the second half of this year.
Okay. I'm sure Sonia is going to ask you some more about what you expect from the government. But just one more word on the macros. Dr. Chaudhuri, can inflation play spoilsport again? We saw those ugly veggie numbers for July. They probably subsided. But my point is, will this again break the game, break the pace of growth, break the pace of the nascent recovery? And secondly, really, is there a scope for the governor to cut rates? And can growth come even at a repo rate of 8% and probably a bank base rate of what, 9.5%?
Let's understand one thing. Growth comes because of people want to make their own lives better. That is an autonomy in the hands of 1.2 billion people of this country. And they will improve matters. They will push against whatever obstacles that might be in their way. And it's up to the larger system to wonder whether you are going to facilitate that process or you're going to make it a bit tougher. So I think growth will recover one way or the other way. As far as the prices are concerned, yes, fresh vegetable and fresh fruit prices have played spoilsport. But look, going forward, I think there is a degree of uncertainty regarding cereal prices because of the monsoon. Monsoon situation, by the way, in 2014 is much better than it was in a comparable time in 2009. So we shouldn't see that kind of large output losses that we had in 2009. That may speak well for what might happen with prices. But I think food prices is a dicey issue. Food prices are difficult to control from the usual conventional monetary point of view. But how do you actually control inflation through monetary policy by destroying demand, right? Now, that works in the case of manufactured goods. It doesn't quite work like that in the case of food prices. And don't know what is the demand that you're going to destroy in an economy that's been growing at sub 5%. I think these are questions that are not easy to answer because monetary policy also plays a signaling role. But I think one has to take a holistic view. But as I said, growth will recover one way or the other way. The two basic agents, individual households, young people, and corporate sector will push growth forward. It's up to the government. It has certain amount of autonomy in trying to facilitate the process. I hope it does so in the second half of this year.
All right, let me also get in the lady into the conversation, and then we'll toss across to Ramdev Agarwal as well. Ms. Bhattacharya, come in on the point that Dr. Chaudhuri was making, because if we do have a pickup in growth, then that would of course help the asset quality that banks are, being burdened under as well. And in this quarter too, we've seen some amount of the pressure subsiding, especially for banks like your own. What's the sense you're getting about how much growth could recover to, and whether the worst is over as far as asset quality pressures are concerned for banks?
Again, I think I fully agree with Dr. Chaudhuri that growth will come willy-nilly whether you reduce the rates of interest or not, and we've been seeing that from the last quarter of the last financial year. You have seen actually the cycle in iron and steel turning, and in a few other areas as well. And yes, asset quality, the pressures are definitely down. It could be the result of a number of steps that we have taken, including the regulator has taken, and that is to determine the stresses at the very beginning and bring about some kind of discipline amongst the lenders and the borrowers to ensure that things don't get worse. But it is also helped by larger top-line numbers, and those numbers we believe will continue to increase. What has been a further game changer has been the fact that the capital markets have been supportive. People have been able to raise equity, and we are also seeing a lot of demand for assets, that is the sale of assets, mergers, consolidations. So these are again other things that sort of help in reducing the pressure on the asset quality. So going forward, I do believe that we are going to see the bottoming out of this cycle very shortly, and we should begin to see the upward movement. As Dr. Chaudhuri said again, that the government can be a facilitator, and if it is a true facilitator, and we are seeing many small steps being taken in order to facilitate this, if that continues, then I do believe that the upturn will come sooner.
Ramdev?
Yeah. My question is about 70% dominance of public sector banks in the entire overall lending and deposit book. So I mean, when we want to grow, I think it is going to be on the back of a very strong banking system. So what kind of thing we can see in last week or so? Could it be a big danger to the overall growth itself?
You mean this repeated questioning by the investigative agencies?
No, not questioning. Just the asset quality and the danger of
asset quality.
Yeah, willful defaulters. I mean, willful defaulters are all over. We have just had one kind of exposure. So
one big exposure.
Would it be systemic kind of a problem for rapid growth to pick up to double digit, and also you need that much lending to happen?
Mr. Bhattacharya, what's your sense?
Could it become a weak point for the growth to be sustained?
Will NPLs weigh down your ability to lend for a bit?
No, the ability to lend I don't think was ever in question. The more of a question was the ability for the promoters to source the equity. Even today, in respect of most of the projects that are held up and which add to the stress in the entire system, I don't think there is any banker who has any paucity of funds for lending. More it is a question of the borrowers being able to raise equivalent amount of equity or whatever is the equity component, and then come to us and tell us to do the disbursements. So I think, the economy has a very major part to play as to how this is going to go forward, in the sense that as and when the borrowers have projects up and ready, they must be able to source the equity component. And the loan component, again, as I said, I don't think really that there is a very big issue over there. And more we are finding that there are other kinds of players also who are showing interest. And the maturity of the Indian market is what will also drive such lenders and such players to come into the market. So I believe going forward, things are not going to get stuck up because there won't be enough funds for lending. What is more important is to get the entire policy framework in place to ensure that there is much better execution of all of the things that we talk about, whether they be getting the clearances, getting the approvals, or also assessing the project properly and getting all the financial closures in place. So I think that is what is going to be more important, rather than one-offs, or rather than simply the fact that, you know, whether the banks will be able to lend enough.
Actually, Mrs. Bhattacharya, Ramdev started by saying great things are never built in a day and that it will require the government enough time to boost up growth. But Dr. Chaudhuri, comment on that. One complaint of some skeptics have been that this government has not announced anything. The budget could have been a UPA budget. It sounded so run of the mill. Do you think this government its priority should be policies, or should it be just execution, as Mrs. Bhattacharya was pointing out? They just put their head down and implement things properly. Where would you lay the stress? What is it that the economy needs now?
You see, I think execution is very important, but you cannot execute in the absence of information. See, first you've got to understand the problem and then execute it. And I think what's really been happening over the last 2-3 months as the government has been in power is that they've been trying to get a handle on the issues. And I think you'd see execution. Informed execution is much better than uninformed execution. You will see that. That's why I'm saying the second half of the year. I think the first half would basically have gone in electioneering and getting to grips with the problems. And I think, I really sincerely hope that they'll be able to do. There is a lot of things that can be done, but they are complex. They're not all that simple and easy. They vary from sector to sector. They are very specific in their nature. And as we have seen, for instance, Cabinet Committee Infrastructure giving clearances to large projects didn't necessarily result in many of these projects taking off, because there were other problems that the projects had faced, whether the promoter funding that Bhattacharya mentioned, or the issues of other smaller clearances like land not being there. So I think there are complex issues, and I think we should give the government time to see to it. And I think, as I said, there's no magic wand. You can't simply say open sesame and everything will fall back in place.
Ramdev, you had a question for Dr. Chaudhuri.
So just one question. Between 2003 to 2008, in last bull run or great economic expansion of India, exports were playing a very major role. Now the global markets are not that conducive for, even at a reduced, weakened rupee, we are not able to push the export at the pace at which we could do it in early part of the decade. So could it be that we can do import substitution, because we have become such a large importer of everything, whether it is in electronics, whether it is defense, whether it is gold. We import every sort of thing. Can it be a determined effort to be import substitution-led kind of growth? One part of the entire growth. Could that be the theme?
I think that is the seduction of false promises. There is really no trade-off. There is no substitution between ability to export and import substitution, unless you want to build tariff barriers and other kinds of trade blockages. Because the ability to do both, it depends on how well you manufacture. You look at the Japanese or the German experience after 1989, when the way the currencies were essentially pressurized to appreciate enormously. And despite that, they continue to be able to export because they're very good at making things. So the first thing that we have to be able to do is to make things more efficiently. So whether you are servicing the export market or you're servicing the domestic market, our ability to do so successfully is contingent on our being able to manufacture in a more efficient fashion. Now, if a manufacturing project or infrastructure project or hotel project, which takes 2 years to construct anywhere else in Asia, we're going to take 6 years to be constructed here. Obviously, we start out with a huge disadvantage. We have to fix these matters.
Fair point, Dr. Chaudhuri. Well, we have to take a break at this point in time. Dr. Chaudhuri, we'll thank you on that note. Thank you for joining us today and putting things into perspective.